We start in Ukraine, where President Volodymyr Zelenskyy says Russia has launched a massive attack with at least 800 drones aimed at targets across much of the country. Zelenskyy says 6 people have been killed. Moscow began the barrage in the early morning in what appears to be a new Kremlin strategy of launching daytime drone attacks rather than relying on the cover of darkness. The attacks, which lasted hours, appeared to target civilian infrastructure, like here in the central Kharkiv region. Nick Connolly is our Kyiv correspondent and joins me now. Nick, what more can you tell us about this attack?
So this, as you mentioned, was very big. We've had basically a couple of weeks now of relatively smaller attacks. Last few days over the weekend, we also had that truce that Russia announced unilaterally, and that meant no missile attacks far away from the front lines, even though the fighting continued on the ground on the battlefield. And what we've seen now over the last few hours is significant attacks on civilian infrastructure, on the railways. This has really been most extreme in the west of the country that normally sees a lot less in the way of attacks than the center in Kyiv, where I am now, or the east or the south closer to the fighting. And we've even seen what the local authorities are calling the biggest attack since the war began on Transcarpathia, Zakarpattia in Ukrainian, the region basically beyond the Carpathian Mountains that borders Hungary, that is the furthest away from the battlefields, and that doesn't even have a curfew, that has basically had the most normal wartime experience in the whole country. We've had already the Slovakian government closing their borders with that region because this is just so unheard of in that part of the country, so far away from the active battle lines.
Does it seem to you like we're witnessing a pivot in Russia's aerial bombardment strategy?
I'm not sure if it's a kind of permanent pivot. It definitely just demonstrates once again that to get past Ukraine's air defenses, Russia really has to store up its weapons and then try and throw as much as it has at the defenses here to grind them down. And we're definitely not through this yet. Authorities here in Ukraine are saying that the night ahead is going to be tough, that they have seen evidence of Russia's bombers getting ready to leave their aerodromes overnight to then send in more missiles, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles over the night. Some indications that this might continue into tomorrow. But that basically that is now the only way that Russia can get past the defenses. According to Ukraine's figures, about 90% of drones are stopped, are intercepted or knocked off course by jammers. 80% of cruise missiles. The one category that really is a lot harder to stop are those ballistic missiles, because the only game in town for those are the Patriot interceptors from America. And as we know, Ukraine has quite a few Patriot batteries, but not enough of those interceptor missiles because America can't produce them fast enough and is now using up a lot of them in the Middle East.
Yeah, tell us a little more about how well equipped Ukraine is, and especially Ukraine's air defenses, of course, to cope with attacks of this scale, especially if this is really a change in strategy on behalf of the Kremlin.
So I think in terms of the capacity, it's also always a guessing game for Ukraine, right? So they might have enough interceptors to deal with tonight's attack, but they don't know how reliable the next supplies, the next promised supplies from America are going to be. Are all those interceptors that have been paid for by European countries from US manufacturers, are they really going to arrive, or are they going to be redirected? So sometimes, they are having to let missiles pass that they could potentially shoot down because they have to keep some supplies ready for the next attack. The other thing is, obviously, you need several interceptor missiles. If you're going to go for a kind of 100% chance of stopping these ballistic missiles, you need 2 or 3 interceptors to stop each ballistic missile. And if you look at the figures coming from Ukraine's intelligence about the numbers of ballistic missiles that Russia is still producing, then that really isn't a kind of good arithmetic for Ukraine and also the West in terms of the numbers of interceptors being produced in America, in Europe, under American license. So it is a very difficult situation. Having said that, technology is helping. You've got much cheaper systems now coming in to stop drones, so using less in the way of expensive missiles to stop drones. And in terms of cruise missiles, there are several different systems that work, and we really haven't seen much in the way of damage from cruise missiles in big cities like Kyiv that have those European systems, like Germany's IRIS-T. So there is a kind of mixed picture there, but certainly that ballistic missile defense issue is basically the biggest one, the issue where Ukraine is most dependent on America and on getting those supplies regularly and being prioritized by a Trump administration that isn't obviously always that friendly to President Zelenskyy.
Yeah, briefly before I let you go, this attack has set off alarm bells beyond Ukraine, hasn't it?
Well, certainly, and every time this happens, you have neighboring countries sending up their F-16s or other planes to make sure those drones and missiles don't cross over the borders of Ukraine into their own countries. But Ukrainians are often pretty amused by those news flashes coming from neighboring countries. They would much rather those countries, Poland, Slovakia, Romania, actually shoot down missiles over Ukrainian territory before they get anywhere near those NATO countries. And for now, there's a sense that European countries don't want to go anywhere near this, and will just watch and see how well Ukraine does defending itself from these attacks.
Nick Connolly in Kyiv, thanks so much.